The crowd's jeers echoed across Willow Creek's dusty Main Street as Zara Valenti clutched her torn shawl around her shoulders. The midday sun of 1876, bearing down mercilessly. Blood trickled from her split lip, the taste of iron mixing with the dust kicked up by the mob that had dragged her from the general store. Her crime? Being caught with a book of poetry that the shop owner's wife claimed had disappeared from their private collection. Thief. The town's self-appointed moral guardian, Mrs. Hollister, shouted, her bony finger pointed accusingly at Zara. "We don't tolerate thieves in Willow Creek. First, it's a book. Next, it'll be our silver." Zara's voice trembled as she tried to explain. "I purchased it in Denver before coming here." "I have the receipt in my liar," Mrs. Hollister cut her off. "No decent woman travels alone selling herbal remedies. We all know what else you're selling." The crowd of townspeople tightened around her, their faces contorted with self-righteous anger. 6 months in Willow Creek trying to build a respectable business, and it had come to this. Zara had come west after losing her parents to influenza in New York, determined to use her knowledge of medicinal plants to make a living. Now, she was being branded not just a thief, but something far worse. Sheriff Mills stood by, arms crossed, making no move to disperse the crowd or hear Zara's side. "Maybe it's time you moved on, Miss Valenti," he suggested with cold indifference. Tears threatened, but Zara refused to give them the satisfaction. She stood straight, despite the fear coursing through her veins. These were the same people who had come to her for remedies for their ailments, who had smiled and chatted with her just yesterday. "The stagecoach leaves at sundown," someone shouted. "Make sure she's on it," another voice joined in. Maybe a night in the pillory would teach her some respect first. It was then that the crowd parted, almost reluctantly, as the sound of spurs jingling against wooden planks cut through the commotion. A tall figure moved with deliberate steps toward the center of the gathering. Vaughn Quincy, whose ranch lay several miles outside of town, approached with a quiet intensity that commanded attention. Zara had seen him only a handful of times since arriving in Willow Creek. He rarely came to town, and when he did, he kept to himself, conducting his business efficiently before returning to his land. Some whispered he was dangerous, others said he was simply private. All Zara knew was that his eyes, deep blue like a mountain lake, were now fixed on her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What's all this about?" Vaughn's voice was low but carried across the suddenly hushed street. Mrs. Hollister puffed up like a prairie hen. "This woman is a thief and I asked what happened," Vaughn interrupted. "Not what you think of her." The shopkeeper stepped forward nervously. "My wife's book of poetry is missing and this woman has the same one. Too much of a coincidence, Mr. Quincy." Vaughn looked at Zara, then at the book that had been wrenched from her hands and now lay in the dirt. He bent down slowly, picked it up, and dusted off the cover with gentle hands that belied his rugged appearance. "Sonnets from the Portuguese," he read aloud. "By Elizabeth Barrett Browning." He flipped it open, examining the first page. "This edition was published last year in Boston." He looked up at the shopkeeper. "When did your wife get her copy, Mr. Henderson?" the man stuttered. "Well, I think it was a gift from her sister about 3 years back." Vaughn nodded thoughtfully. "So it couldn't be the same book, could it?" He handed the volume back to Zara, his fingers brushing hers briefly. "Besides, I recognize this book. I gave it to her myself." A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. "You did?" Mrs. Hollister asked suspiciously. Vaughn's gaze never left Zara's face as he spoke, his voice growing firmer with each word. "Yes, madam. Miss Valenti isn't just passing through, she's here at my invitation." He took a step closer to Zara, his broad shoulders shielding her from the crowd's scrutiny. "She's my treasure and I won't have her treated this way." Zara's eyes widened in shock. They had barely exchanged 10 words before today. "What was he doing, your treasure?" Sheriff Mills repeated incredulously. "Since when, Quincy?" "She's been here half a year, and I've never seen you two exchange more than a passing nod." A small, cryptic smile played on Vaughn's lips. A man's heart is his own business, Sheriff. I'm a private person, as you well know. But make no mistake, he placed a protective hand on Zara's shoulder. This woman is under my protection. The touch of his hand sent an unexpected warmth through Zara despite her confusion. She should contradict him, tell everyone this was a fabrication, but the alternative was being run out of town or worse. And something in those blue eyes implored her to trust him. Vaughn turned to address the crowd directly. Now, I suggest you all go about your business. And Mr. Henderson, I think you owe Miss Valenti an apology. The shopkeeper looked at his feet, then at his wife, who was turning an interesting shade of red. Perhaps I was hasty, he mumbled. Mrs. Hollister wasn't so easily cowed. This doesn't explain her living alone, selling those suspicious potions and powders. Miss Valenti is a trained herbalist, Vaughn replied evenly. Those suspicious potions cured my foreman's rheumatism when nothing else would. And as for her living alone, he paused, his expression unreadable. That situation is about to change. Before Zara could process what he meant, Vaughn gently took her elbow. Come on, let's get you home so you can pack your things. Pack my things? She whispered, finding her voice at last. Yes, he said, loudly enough for those nearby to hear. It's time you moved out to the ranch, where you belong. As they walked away from the dispersing crowd, Zara's mind raced with questions. What had just happened? Why had this near stranger stepped forward to defend her, claiming her as his own? And what did he mean about her moving to his ranch? Once they were out of earshot, she pulled her arm free and faced him. Mr. Quincy, while I appreciate your intervention, I don't understand what just happened. Vaughn glanced back to ensure they weren't being followed, then removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with hints of copper in the sunlight. I apologize for the presumption, Miss Valenti, but I couldn't stand by and watch them treat you that way. His eyes scanned her face, noting her split lip with a frown. You're hurt. It's nothing, she said dismissively. But you told them. You called me your treasure. Why would you say such a thing? A muscle twitched in his jaw. It seemed the quickest way to stop what was happening. In these parts, a woman alone is vulnerable, but a woman connected to a man with land and means is afforded certain protections. He shifted uncomfortably. I've observed your work since you arrived. You've helped many people, including my ranch hands. What they were doing wasn't right. Zara studied him cautiously. And now, you've told the entire town I'm moving to your ranch. I meant what I said about the offer, he replied. My ranch is 15 miles out. I have a vacant cabin that was built for the previous owner's mother. It's small but comfortable. You could continue your work there without the town's interference. My men and the neighboring homesteads would provide plenty of customers for your remedies. She was taken aback by the genuine offer. Mr. Quincy, you don't even know me. A hint of a smile crossed his face. I know enough. I know you're honest, hardworking, and skilled at what you do. I know you treat everyone the same, whether they have money or not, and I know Willow Creek would be poorer without your services. He replaced his hat. Think of it as a business arrangement. You provide your medicines to my ranch hands at a fair price, and I provide you with safe lodging. Zara considered her options. Her rented room above the laundry suddenly seemed precarious. Even if she survived this incident, the whispers and suspicions would continue. A fresh start somewhere else would mean starting from nothing again. What about your reputation? She asked. You've just told everyone I'm special to you, Vaughn shrugged. My reputation can withstand it. People already think I'm peculiar for keeping to myself. His expression grew serious. The choice is yours, Miss Valenti. Stay here and face more of the same or accept my offer. Either way, I'll see you safely through today. Zara touched her split lip gingerly, wincing at the sting. The memory of those accusing faces still fresh in her mind made the decision easier than it might have been. I accept your offer, Mr. Quincy, she said quietly, but I want a proper agreement. I won't be beholden to anyone. Vaughn nodded, respect flashing in his eyes. Of course. We'll draw up terms that satisfy us both. He offered his arm. Shall we collect your belongings now? I think it best you don't spend another night in town. As they walked toward the laundry where she rented her small room, Zara felt the stares of townspeople watching from windows and doorways. Word traveled fast in Willow Creek. By sundown, everyone would know that quiet, mysterious Vaughn Quincy had claimed the herbalist woman as his treasure and taken her to his ranch. What neither of them could know was how this hasty arrangement, born of necessity and compassion, would change both their lives forever. The journey to Quincy Ranch was mostly silent, save for the steady clop of hooves and the occasional creak of the wagon loaded with Zara's belongings. Her life in Willow Creek had been modest. Everything she owned fit into 3 trunks and a few crates containing her precious herbs, tinctures, and medical texts. As they left the town behind, the landscape opened up into rolling grasslands dotted with sagebrush and the occasional stand of cottonwoods. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the trail, and the air carried the scent of wild mint and sun-warmed earth. Despite her uncertainty about what lay ahead, Zara found herself relaxing as the distance between her and Willow Creek grew. "It's beautiful out here," she commented, breaking the prolonged silence. Vaughn glanced at her, then back to the trail. "It is. Especially this time of year, before the summer heat bakes everything brown." "How long have you lived here?" 7 years, he replied. "Bought the place when it was little more than a run-down shack and a few hundred acres of neglected grazing land." Zara studied his profile, noting the firm set of his jaw and the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years squinting against the sun. "You've built it into something substantial, from what I've heard." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "People talk too much, but yes, it's a good operation now. 8,000 acres, 400 head of cattle, and enough horses to keep us moving." He paused. "And enough work to keep me too busy to visit town often, which suits me fine." "Is that why you live so isolated? You don't care for people?" Vaughn considered her question. "I care for people well enough, just prefer them in smaller doses than a town provides." He glanced at her again. "What about you? What brought a New York woman all the way to Colorado territory?" Zara watched a hawk circling lazily above them. "After my parents died, there wasn't much keeping me there. My father was a doctor, and I'd been learning from him since I was a girl. Not formally, of course women aren't welcome in medical schools, but I absorbed everything I could. When he was gone, no one wanted treatment from a woman, no matter whose daughter I was. So you came west." "Yes, I thought people here might be more practical about who provides their care when doctors are scarce." She gave a bitter laugh. "I was right about that part, at least. They'll take my medicines when they're suffering, but that doesn't mean they respect the hand that offers them." Vaughn nodded thoughtfully. "Frontier has its own brand of hypocrisy. People pride themselves on independence and practicality until it challenges their notions of how things ought to be." They fell silent again as the wagon climbed a gentle rise. When they crested the hill, Quincy Ranch spread out before them, a collection of well-maintained buildings nestled in a protected valley, with corrals, a barn, bunkhouse, and a main house constructed of sturdy logs with a broad porch wrapping around 2 sides. Smoke curled from the stone chimney and a creek glittered as it wound through the property. "There it is," Vaughn said, a note of pride in his voice. "Home." As they approached, several men looked up from their work. A tall, lean cowboy with graying temples detached himself from the group and walked toward the wagon. "Didn't expect you back so soon, boss," he called. His eyes widened slightly when he noticed Zara. "Madam," he added, touching the brim of his hat. "Lloyd, this is Miss Zara Valenti," Vaughn said. "She'll be staying in the old cabin. Miss Valenti, this is Lloyd Peterson, my foreman." Recognition dawned on Lloyd's weathered face. "The herb lady from town, the one who fixed my hands." He flexed his fingers as if to demonstrate their improved condition. "The very same," Vaughn confirmed. "There was some trouble in town. Miss Valenti will be continuing her practice from here." Lloyd's eyes darted between them, clearly wondering about the nature of the arrangement but too tactful to ask directly. "I'll tell my wife." She'll be pleased to have another woman around the place. He turned to Zara. Mrs. Peterson will want to help you get settled, I'm sure. That's very kind, Zara replied. I'd appreciate the company. Vaughn clicked to the horses, guiding the wagon past the main buildings. Lloyd and his wife Hannah live in the smaller house just beyond the bunkhouse. They've been with me since the beginning. They continued a short distance further until they reached a snug cabin set apart from the other buildings, nestled against a small grove of aspens. It was simple but charming, with a stone foundation, solid log walls, and a porch just large enough for a bench and small table. Here we are, Vaughn said, setting the brake and jumping down from the wagon. He came around to offer Zara assistance, but she had already begun climbing down on her own. He stepped back, watching as she surveyed her new home. The cabin was far nicer than Zara had expected. Though small, it had been built with care. The logs were well fitted, the windows larger than usual for a frontier dwelling, allowing plenty of light inside. Let me show you around before we unload your things, Vaughn suggested, producing a key from his pocket. The interior consisted of a main room with a stone fireplace, a small but functional kitchen area, and a separate bedroom. The previous occupant had left behind some furniture, a table and chairs, a cushioned rocker by the fireplace, a bed frame and dresser in the bedroom. It's not fancy, Vaughn said, watching her reaction, but it's sound. No leaks and the chimney draws well. The creek is just down that path for water, though there's a well closer to the main house you can use too. Zara moved slowly through the space, running her hand along the smooth wooden mantel. After her cramped room above the laundry with its perpetual smell of lye soap and coal smoke, this peaceful cabin felt like a palace. It's perfect, she said quietly. Far better than I expected. Vaughn seemed relieved. Good. Hannah keeps a vegetable garden she'll be happy to share, and there's a spot behind the cabin that gets good sun if you want to grow some of your herbs. You've thought of everything, Zara observed, studying him with renewed curiosity. He shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. Just being practical. Now let's get your things inside before it gets dark. With Vaughn's help, Zara's belongings were quickly transferred into the cabin. As the last trunk was carried in, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s appeared at the door, carrying a covered basket. So it's true, she exclaimed. Lloyd told me we had a new neighbor and I could scarcely believe it. She bustled in without waiting for an invitation. I'm Hannah Peterson, dear, brought you some supper, figuring you wouldn't want to cook after your journey. Hannah, this is Miss Valenti, Vaughn introduced them formally. Zara, please, she corrected gently. Hannah beamed. Zara it is then, and you must call me Hannah. No need for formalities out here. She set the basket on the table and began unpacking it, revealing a pot of stew, fresh biscuits, and a jar of preserved peaches. This is incredibly kind, Zara said, suddenly realizing how hungry she was. The day's events had left no time for eating. Nonsense. We take care of our own out here, Hannah replied, shooting a significant look at Vaughn that Zara couldn't quite interpret. Now, Mr. Quincy, you run along and let us women get acquainted. I'll help Zara settle in. Vaughn looked as if he might protest but thought better of it. All right. I'll check on you tomorrow, Miss Valenti, to see if you need anything else. He nodded to both women. Good evening. After he left, Hannah turned to Zara with undisguised curiosity. Now, dear, I won't pry into what's between you and the boss, that's your business, but I must say, this is the most excitement we've had around here in years. Zara felt her cheeks warm. There's nothing between us, Hannah. Mr. Quincy intervened when I was having trouble in town, and he offered me this cabin as a safe place to live and work. Hannah raised an eyebrow. Did he now? Interesting. She busied herself with setting out bowls for the stew. That doesn't sound like the Vaughn Quincy I know. Not that he isn't kind, mind you, but he keeps to himself. Has ever since he came out here. He mentioned he's been here 7 years, Zara said, helping to arrange the table. That's right. Arrived with not much more than the clothes on his back and a determination I've rarely seen. Worked himself half to death that first year. Hannah ladled stew into the bowls. Never speaks of where he came from or what brought him west. Lloyd says a man's past is his own business, but I've always wondered what drove a clearly educated man to bury himself on a remote ranch. Zara sat down at the table pondering this new information about her benefactor. He seems complex, Hannah laughed. That's one way of putting it, stubborn as a mule, private as a confessional, but fair to a fault and generous when it counts. She sat across from Zara. Now tell me about yourself, dear. I understand you're a healer of sorts. As they ate, Zara explained her background and training, her journey west, and her unfortunate experience in Willow Creek. Hannah listened attentively, occasionally asking questions or expressing outrage at the treatment Zara had received. Well, their loss is our gain, Hannah declared finally. We could use someone with your skills out here. Nearest doctor's in Mineral Springs, 30 miles away, and he's usually 3/4 drunk by noon. After they finished eating, Hannah helped Zara unpack her essential items and make up the bed with fresh linens she'd brought along. As the older woman prepared to leave, she paused at the door. One more thing you should know, she said carefully. When Lloyd rode back and told the boys about you coming here, there was talk. Not unkind, she hastened to add, but curious. Word spreads fast, and by now, everyone for 20 miles will have heard that Vaughn Quincy brought a woman to his ranch and called her his treasure. People will draw their own conclusions. Zara's stomach tightened. What are you saying? Hannah's expression was kind but serious. Only that reputations are fragile things out here, especially for women. Whatever the truth between you and Mr. Quincy, you might want to discuss how you'll present your arrangement to others. She patted Zara's hand. Just something to consider, dear. I'll come by tomorrow to show you around properly. After Hannah left, Zara sat in the rocker by the fireplace, watching the flames dance as she contemplated her situation. She had escaped one predicament only to find herself in another, potentially more complicated one. Yet as she looked around the cozy cabin that was now her home, she couldn't bring herself to regret her decision. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, and through the window she could see the vast canopy of stars that only the western sky could offer. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, tonight she was safe, warm, and for the first time in months, not completely alone. Dawn broke clear and crisp over Quincy Ranch, painting the eastern sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold. Zara had risen with the first light, her body still attuned to the early rhythms required in her previous life. After heating water for washing and making a simple breakfast from the provisions Hannah had left, she decided to explore her new surroundings. The morning air carried a hint of chill that would burn off as the sun climbed higher. Dew sparkled on the grass as Zara followed the path from her cabin toward the creek. Birds called to one another from the aspens, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster announced the day with enthusiastic crowing. The creek proved to be larger than she'd expected, a proper stream with clear, swift running water that bubbled over smooth stones. Willows drooped gracefully along its banks, and in a sunny patch nearby, Zara spotted several plants she recognized as having medicinal properties. She made a mental note to return later with her gathering basket. As she followed the creek's meandering path, she found herself approaching the main area of the ranch. Men were already at work, some leading horses from the corral, others mending tack outside the barn. They paused briefly when they noticed her, touching their hats respectfully before returning to their tasks with perhaps a bit more vigor than before. Zara was deciding whether to introduce herself or return to her cabin when she spotted Vaughn emerging from the barn, deep in conversation with Lloyd. His shirt sleeves were rolled up to reveal muscular forearms, and his dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. When he looked up and saw her, he said something to Lloyd and strode in her direction. "Good morning, Miss Valenti," he called. "You're up early." "Good morning. Yes, I wanted to see the property in daylight," she replied. "It's beautiful here." Vaughn's expression softened slightly. "Thank you." Did you sleep well? Very well, thank you. The cabin is more comfortable than anywhere I've stayed in months. He nodded, seemingly pleased. Good, I wondered if you might join me for breakfast at the main house. There are some matters we should discuss. Zara remembered Hannah's parting words from the previous night. Yes, I think that would be wise. As they walked together toward the main house, Zara was acutely aware of the covert glances from the ranch hands. Your men are curious about me, she observed quietly. Vaughn's mouth twitched. Can't blame them. Women are scarce out here, and your arrival was unexpected. For all of us, Zara agreed with a wry smile. The main house was impressive up close, larger than it had appeared from a distance, with a spacious central room that served as both dining area and parlor. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, while large windows offered views of the mountains to the west. The furnishings were solid and masculine, but comfortable, with a few unexpected touches of refinement. A well-used chest set on a side table, bookshelves filled with volumes that appeared regularly read, and a quality violin case propped in one corner. You play? Zara asked, nodding toward the instrument. Sometimes, Vaughn replied, motioning for her to take a seat at the dining table. Music makes the winters more bearable. He disappeared briefly into the kitchen area, returning with coffee and a platter of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. I'm not much of a cook, but I manage the basics, he said, setting the food down. Mrs. Peterson usually prepares meals for the men in the cookhouse, but I prefer to fend for myself when possible. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Vaughn cleared his throat. About yesterday, he began. I realize my intervention has created a situation. Zara set down her fork. Yes, it has. Hannah mentioned that word has likely spread about my arrival here and about what you said in town. Vaughn ran a hand through his hair, confirming Zara's earlier impression about its disheveled state. I spoke without thinking through the consequences. For that, I apologize. You were trying to help, Zara acknowledged. And you did. Without your intervention, I might have been driven out of Willow Creek with nothing but the clothes on my back. Still, I've complicated your situation by connecting your reputation to mine. He met her eyes directly. Which brings me to what we need to discuss. People will assume things about our relationship. That puts you in a difficult position. Zara sipped her coffee, gathering her thoughts. It does. If people believe I'm your kept woman, my professional reputation suffers. If they believe we're engaged in a proper courtship, they'll expect certain developments. Exactly. Vaughn leaned back in his chair. I see three options. First, we could simply ignore the rumors and carry on as we are, with you living in the cabin and practicing your healing arts. However, that may lead to continued speculation that could damage your standing. What's the second option? We could clarify that our arrangement is purely professional. You're here as the ranch's healer, nothing more. I would make that clear to everyone, in town and out here. Zara nodded slowly. And the third option? Vaughn hesitated, his expression unreadable. We could allow people to believe we are courting, at least for a time. It would provide you with the protection of my name and position while giving you time to establish yourself professionally in the area. Zara stared at him, taken aback by the suggestion. You would pretend to court me. It wouldn't be entirely pretense, he said carefully. I admire you, Miss Valenti, your courage, your skills, your determination. In different circumstances, I might have sought a proper introduction and asked permission to call on you. A warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun spread through Zara's chest. I hardly know what to say, Mr. Quincy. You don't need to say anything right now, he assured her. It's merely one option to consider. Whatever you decide, I'll respect your choice. Zara studied him across the table, this man who had stepped forward to defend her when no one else would, who had opened his home to her, and who now offered her a way to preserve her dignity. There was something compelling about him beyond his physical attributes, a depth she hadn't encountered often. What would such a courtship entail? She asked finally. Nothing improper, he said quickly. We would be seen together occasionally. Perhaps you would accompany me to Sunday services in Mineral Springs, or to the harvest dance in the autumn. I would call on you at your cabin, maybe for chess or conversation in the evenings, enough to satisfy propriety without compromising your independence. And how would it end? People would expect an engagement eventually. Vaughn nodded. After a suitable period, we would quietly agree to part ways amicably. By then, you would be established in the area, with a reputation based on your skills rather than your connection to me. It was a rational plan, yet Zara couldn't help wondering if there was more to his offer than practical considerations. Why would you do this for me, Mr. Quincy? You barely know me. His expression softened slightly. Perhaps I'd like the opportunity to know you better. And perhaps I understand what it's like to need a fresh start. The sincerity in his voice made Zara's decision easier than she'd expected. Very well, Mr. Quincy, I accept your third option with one condition. Name it. If either of us becomes uncomfortable with the arrangement, we agree to end it immediately with no hard feelings. Vaughn extended his hand across the table. Agreed. As their hands met in a firm shake, Zara felt a curious flutter in her stomach. What had begun as a simple act of kindness was evolving into something more complex and potentially more dangerous to her heart than anything she had faced in Willow Creek. The next few weeks brought a steady rhythm to Zara's life at Quincy Ranch. Each morning, she rose with the sun and spent the early hours gathering herbs from the increasingly familiar landscape around her cabin. Hannah had indeed shown her the vegetable garden and helped her establish a small medicinal herb plot behind the cabin, which Zara tended daily. Word of her presence and skills spread quickly through the area. At first, it was just the ranch hands who came to her with their ailments, burns, cuts, aches, and the occasional tooth that needed pulling. Zara treated them efficiently and fairly, charging reasonable prices or sometimes accepting payment in the form of fresh game or handcrafted items. Then came the neighboring ranchers and their families, tentatively at first, but with increasing confidence as her remedies proved effective. By the end of her first month, Zara had a regular stream of patients arriving at her cabin, and she had even been called out to several homesteads for more serious cases. Through it all, Vaughn maintained a respectful distance while ensuring everyone understood that Zara was under his protection. He called on her 3 evenings a week, sometimes bringing a book to read aloud or challenging her to a chess match. They discovered a shared love of literature and music, and occasionally, if the evening was pleasant, they would sit on her porch and talk until the stars emerged in full splendor overhead. It was during one such evening, as July gave way to August, that Zara found herself studying Vaughn's profile in the fading light. He was reading a passage from Thoreau's Walden, his deep voice giving weight to the philosopher's words about living deliberately. There was something mesmerizing about the way his expression changed as he read a vulnerability that he rarely showed in daylight hours. When he finished the passage, he looked up to find her watching him. "What is it?" he asked, closing the book. "I was just thinking that you're something of a Thoreau yourself," she replied. "Living apart, self-sufficient, observing the world with a certain detachment." A smile touched his lips. "I've never thought of it that way, but perhaps you're right." He set the book aside. "Though unlike Thoreau, I didn't choose solitude as an experiment. It was more of a necessity." Zara sensed an opening in his usually guarded demeanor. "Will you tell me why you came west? What you were leaving behind?" Vaughn was silent for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "I was a lawyer in Boston, had a promising career, a fiancé from a good family, a future all mapped out." He gazed out at the darkening landscape. "Then I took on a case defending a man accused of embezzlement. Everyone said he was guilty, the evidence seemed clear, but something didn't fit. I kept digging and eventually discovered that my own firm's senior partner was the actual culprit." "What happened?" Zara asked softly. "I confronted him privately, thinking he would do the honorable thing and confess." Instead, he destroyed evidence, bribed witnesses, and made sure my client was convicted. Vaughn's jaw tightened at the memory. The man hanged himself in his cell the night before sentencing. That's terrible, Zara murmured. After that, I couldn't stay. The partner was too powerful, too connected. My fiancée sided with her family who had investments with the firm. My reputation was systematically dismantled. He shrugged, as if dismissing the weight of the memory. So I left. Traveled west until I found a place where a man is judged by his actions, not his connections. And you never tried to clear your name. Vaughn's smile was tinged with bitterness. What would be the point? The man I failed is still dead. Besides, I found something here I never had in Boston. What's that? Peace, he said simply. Most days, anyway. Zara reached across the small space between their chairs and placed her hand on his. Thank you for telling me. Vaughn looked down at their hands, then turned his palm upward to clasp hers gently. You're easy to talk to, Zara. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his voice sent a warm current through her veins. So are you, Vaughn, she replied, testing the intimacy of his name on her tongue. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, hands linked, as the first stars appeared overhead. Zara was acutely aware of the roughness of his palm against hers, the strength in his fingers, and the unexpected tenderness of his touch. Finally, Vaughn released her hand and stood. It's getting late. I should let you rest. Zara rose as well, suddenly self-conscious. Yes, I have several patients coming tomorrow. At the steps of her porch, Vaughn paused and turned to her. Would you consider accompanying me to Sunday services in Mineral Springs this weekend? It might be good for you to meet more people in the area, expand your practice. I'd like that, Zara replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Good, I'll come by at 8. He hesitated, then gently touched her cheek with the back of his fingers, a gesture so brief she might have imagined it. Good night, Zara. Good night, Vaughn. As she watched him walk away, disappearing into the darkness toward the main house, Zara acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding for weeks. Their pretend courtship was becoming less pretend with each passing day, at least on her part. The question was whether Vaughn felt the same, or if his attentions were still motivated primarily by kindness and a sense of responsibility. Sunday dawned clear and warm, with just enough breeze to temper the August heat. Zara had risen earlier than usual, taking extra care with her appearance. She chose her best dress, a deep blue cotton with subtle embroidery at the collar and cuffs, and arranged her dark hair in a simple but elegant style. As promised, Vaughn arrived at 8 o'clock, driving a polished buggy pulled by a matched pair of bay horses. He wore a crisp white shirt with a string tie, a dark vest, and his best boots freshly polished. His hat was new, or at least Zara had never seen it before. You look beautiful, he said simply as he helped her into the buggy. Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself, she replied, noticing the way the morning sun highlighted the copper tones in his hair. The drive to Mineral Springs took just over an hour, during which they talked easily about books, patients, ranch matters, and the changing landscape around them. As they approached the town, Vaughn grew more reserved. People will be curious, he warned. I haven't brought anyone to services before. I understand, Zara assured him. I'm prepared for scrutiny. Mineral Springs was larger than Willow Creek, with a proper church building, a school, and several businesses lining its main street. As Vaughn guided the buggy toward the church, Zara could see people already gathering outside, dressed in their Sunday best. When Vaughn helped Zara down from the buggy, she felt the weight of curious stares. He offered his arm, which she took gratefully, and led her toward the church steps. Along the way, he nodded greetings to several people, occasionally stopping to introduce Zara. Miss Valenti is a skilled herbalist, he would say. She's established her practice at my ranch and serves the surrounding area. Most people were polite, if reserved, in their welcome. A few of the women exchanged meaningful glances that Zara pretended not to notice. By the time they entered the church and took seats near the back, She felt as if she had passed through a gauntlet of inspection. "You're doing fine," Vaughn murmured, as if sensing her tension. The service itself was unremarkable familiar hymns, earnest prayers, and a sermon about forgiveness that seemed to go on rather longer than necessary. Throughout, Zara was conscious of Vaughn beside her, their shoulders occasionally brushing when they rose or sat for different parts of the service. After the final blessing, the congregation lingered for socializing. Vaughn stayed close to Zara's side as they navigated the crowd, his hand occasionally coming to rest lightly on the small of her back, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. They were speaking with the minister and his wife when a well-dressed woman approached, her expression a careful mask of politeness. "Vaughn Quincy, as I live and breathe," she said, extending a gloved hand. "It's been an age since you've graced us with your presence." "Mrs. Blackwood," Vaughn replied, taking her hand briefly. "May I present Miss Zara Valenti?" "Zara, this is Mrs. Alina Blackwood," Zara nodded politely. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Blackwood." The woman's eyes assessed Zara with cool precision. "Miss Valenti, I understand you're staying at Quincy Ranch." The slight pause before staying carried unmistakable implications. "Yes," Zara replied evenly. "I've established my medical practice there. Mr. Quincy has been kind enough to provide a cabin for my use." "How interesting. And you're a doctor, you say?" "An herbalist," Zara corrected. "I was trained by my father, who was a physician in New York." Mrs. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "I see. Well, it's certainly progressive of Vaughn to support such an unusual vocation for a lady." She turned to Vaughn. "Speaking of progressive thinking, my daughter Caroline has just returned from finishing school in Denver. Perhaps you remember her. She's grown into quite an accomplished young woman." "I'm sure she has," Vaughn replied neutrally. "Please give her my regards." "You should deliver them yourself," Mrs. Blackwood suggested. "We're hosting a small gathering next Saturday evening. Nothing elaborate, just a few neighbors. We would be delighted if you would join us." Her gaze flickered briefly to Zara. "Both of you, of course." Vaughn glanced at Zara, a question in his eyes. She gave a slight nod. "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood," he said. "We would be honored to attend." "Wonderful. 8 o'clock then." With a final assessing look at Zara, Mrs. Blackwood moved on to greet other parishioners. "That was interesting," Zara murmured when the woman was out of earshot. Vaughn's expression was apologetic. "Alina Blackwood has been trying to interest me in her daughter for years. I'm sorry if she made you uncomfortable." "Not at all. I've faced far worse than a mother with matrimonial ambitions." Zara smiled. "Though I'm surprised you agreed to attend her gathering. It seemed like a good opportunity to further establish our relationship in the community," Vaughn replied. "Unless you'd rather not go." "No, I think we should," Zara said thoughtfully. "If nothing else, it might help my practice to meet more potential patients." As they prepared to leave, Zara noticed that Vaughn seemed distracted, his gaze repeatedly drawn to a man standing across the churchyard, a tall, distinguished-looking gentleman with silver at his temples, deep in conversation with several other men. "Who is that?" she asked quietly. "Judge William Harrington," Vaughn replied, his voice tight. "He presides over the territorial circuit court. You know him, not personally, but I've heard he's a fair man, which is rare enough in these parts." Vaughn offered his arm. "Shall we?" "I thought we might have lunch at the hotel before heading back." As they walked to the buggy, Zara sensed there was more to Vaughn's interest in the judge than he was saying, but she didn't press. Everyone had their secrets, and Vaughn had already shared more of his past with her than she had expected. Perhaps in time he would tell her the rest. The Blackwood residence was an impressive 2-story house on the outskirts of Mineral Springs, surrounded by well-tended gardens and lit by numerous lanterns that cast a warm glow in the gathering dusk. As Vaughn helped Zara down from the buggy, she smoothed the skirt of her best dress, a deep burgundy silk that had been one of her few indulgences before leaving New York. "Nervous?" Vaughn asked, offering his arm. "A little," she admitted. It's been some time since I attended a social gathering of this sort, he smiled reassuringly. You'll outshine everyone there. The compliment brought a flush to her cheeks. I doubt Mrs. Blackwood would agree. Mrs. Blackwood's opinion matters very little to me, he replied, leading her up the walkway. Inside, the house was elegantly furnished with pieces that must have been transported at great expense from the East. About 20 guests mingled in the spacious parlor, the women in fine dresses, the men in their best suits. Conversation paused briefly as Zara and Vaughn entered, curious glances assessing the pair. Mrs. Blackwood glided forward to greet them, resplendent in midnight blue taffeta. Mr. Quincy, Miss Valenti, how delightful that you could join us. She gestured to a young woman at her side, a pretty blonde with wide blue eyes and a carefully arranged expression of demure interest. Vaughn, you remember my daughter, Caroline. Of course, Vaughn replied politely. Miss Blackwood, it's a pleasure to see you again. May I present Miss Zara Valenti? Caroline's assessment of Zara was swift and dismissive. How do you do, Miss Valenti? Mother tells me you're some sort of healer. An herbalist, Zara corrected smoothly. I specialize in traditional remedies using native plants. How fascinating, Caroline said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. Mr. Quincy, Mother mentioned you might be willing to advise Father on some legal matters regarding our southern property line. Vaughn's expression remained neutral, but Zara felt his arm tense beneath her hand. I'm no longer practicing law, Miss Blackwood, as I believe your mother knows. Oh, but surely for old friends, Caroline began. Caroline, don't monopolize our guests, Mrs. Blackwood interrupted. There are refreshments in the dining room, and Mr. Henderson has been asking after you, Vaughn. Something about a stallion he's considering purchasing. As they made their way through the gathering, Zara noticed that while some guests greeted them warmly, others exchanged whispers behind their hands. She held her head high, determined not to show how much the scrutiny affected her. Vaughn stayed close to her side, occasionally introducing her to people he knew. When they reached the dining room, he procured glasses of punch for them both. You're doing wonderfully, he murmured, his lips close to her ear. It feels like I'm being evaluated for a position I didn't apply for, she whispered back, his mouth quirked in a half-smile. Welcome to Frontier Society. It's remarkably similar to Boston in that regard, just with less polish and more direct staring. A distinguished older man approached them, nodding cordially to Vaughn. Mr. Quincy, good to see you again. Judge Harrington, Vaughn replied, extending his hand. Miss Valenti, may I present Judge William Harrington of the Territorial Circuit Court? Judge, this is Miss Zara Valenti. Zara recognized the man from the church gathering. Up close, she could see the intelligence in his gray eyes and the hint of kindness in his weathered face. A pleasure, Miss Valenti, the judge said, bowing slightly. I've heard interesting things about your work. Mrs. Peterson speaks very highly of your skills. Thank you, Your Honor. Hannah has been incredibly kind to me. Not kind accurate, the judge corrected. My wife suffered terribly with headaches until she tried your willow bark tincture, first relief she's had in years. Zara smiled, genuinely pleased. I'm so glad it helped her. Mr. Quincy, the judge continued, turning to Vaughn, I wonder if I might have a word with you about a legal matter, nothing official, just seeking your perspective. Vaughn hesitated, glancing at Zara. Would you excuse me for a moment? Of course, she assured him. I'll be fine. As Vaughn stepped away with the judge, Zara found herself momentarily alone. She moved toward one of the large windows, admiring the view of the garden illuminated by moonlight. It's quite a change from treating minors and cowboys, isn't it? A female voice said behind her. Zara turned to find a woman in her 30s, dressed elegantly but without the ostentation of some of the other guests. I'm sorry, have we met? Zara asked. Not formally. I'm Margaret Harrington, the judge's wife. The woman extended her hand. And I wanted to thank you personally for the headache remedy. It's been life-changing. I'm so glad, Zara replied, warming to the woman's straightforward manner. The willow bark contains a compound similar to what physicians in Europe are now studying for pain relief. Fascinating and refreshing to meet a woman who understands such things. Margaret lowered her voice. I must say, you've caused quite a stir arriving on Vaughn Quincy's arm. He's been the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties for years, despite Mrs. Blackwood's best efforts. Zara felt her cheeks warm. Our relationship is evolving. Margaret's eyes twinkled knowingly. The best ones always are. She glanced across the room to where Vaughn stood in deep conversation with the judge. He seems different with you, less guarded. It suits him. Before Zara could respond, Caroline Blackwood approached, 2 other young women in tow. Miss Valenti, I wondered if you might settle a debate for us. Her tone was overly sweet. My friends and I were discussing your unusual situation. Is it true you live alone in a cabin on Mr. Quincy's property? Margaret Harrington stiffened beside Zara, but Zara placed a calming hand on her arm. Yes, that's correct, Zara replied evenly. Mr. Quincy has generously provided a cabin where I can live and practice my healing arts. Caroline raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. How progressive of him, and your chaperone is. I wasn't aware I needed one, Miss Blackwood. I'm a professional woman conducting my business independently. One of Caroline's friends tittered nervously. But surely, living on a ranch full of men is perfectly safe, as Mr. Quincy runs a respectable operation where his employees know to behave appropriately, Zara finished firmly. Besides, Mrs. Peterson is just a short walk away should I require female companionship. Caroline's smile thinned. Still, one wonders what drew Mr. Quincy to offer such an arrangement. He's never shown interest in medical matters before. The implication was clear, and Zara felt her temper rising. Before she could respond, Margaret intervened. Perhaps Mr. Quincy simply recognizes talent and integrity when he sees it, Caroline. Qualities that benefit the entire community. Her tone was pleasant, but carried an unmistakable rebuke. Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe Miss Valenti promised to tell me more about her studies in New York. As Margaret led Zara away, she murmured, Don't let them rattle you. Caroline is simply disappointed that her mother's plans to secure Mr. Quincy as a son-in-law appear to be failing. Thank you for your support, Zara replied gratefully. It seems I've stumbled into more complicated waters than I realized. The frontier has fewer people but just as many intrigues as the cities, Margaret observed. Speaking of which, I believe your escort is looking for you. Vaughn was indeed scanning the room, his expression relaxing when he spotted Zara. He made his way to her side, nodding respectfully to Margaret. Mrs. Harrington, I see you've met Miss Valenti. Indeed, and found her delightful company, Margaret replied. The judge was impressed with her as well, Vaughn. He mentioned that you seemed happier than when he last saw you. A slight flush colored Vaughn's cheeks. The judge is observant as always. And tactful enough not to mention it directly, Margaret added with a smile. Now, I should return to my husband before Mrs. Blackwood monopolizes him completely. Miss Valenti, I hope you'll call on me next time you're in town. I'd love to learn more about your work. After she departed, Vaughn leaned closer to Zara. Everything all right? I saw Caroline speaking with you. Nothing I couldn't handle, Zara assured him, though I'm beginning to understand why you avoid social gatherings. Would you like to leave? He offered. We've made our appearance. Zara was tempted but shook her head. No, that would only fuel gossip. But perhaps we could step outside for some air. Vaughn led her through French doors onto a veranda that wrapped around the side of the house. The night air was cool and fragrant with late summer blossoms, a welcome relief from the stuffiness inside. I apologize for subjecting you to this, Vaughn said as they strolled to a more private corner of the veranda. I didn't anticipate quite this level of scrutiny. It's not your fault. People will talk regardless of what we do. Zara leaned against the railing, looking out at the shadowy garden. Margaret Harrington mentioned that you've been considered the area's most eligible bachelor for some time, Vaughn grimaced. An exaggeration, I'm sure. I don't think so, Zara said softly. Caroline Blackwood certainly seemed disappointed that you've directed your attention elsewhere. Caroline Blackwood is interested in my land and the status of my Eastern education, not me, Vaughn replied dryly. She knows nothing about who I really am. And who is that? Zara asked, turning to face him. In the moonlight, his expression was open in a way she rarely saw. A man who values honesty above social graces, who prefers the company of horses to most people, who has made many mistakes but tries to live by a code he can respect. He stepped closer. A man who finds himself thinking about a certain herbalist far more often than he should. Zara's breath caught. Vaughn. I know this began as a convenient arrangement, he continued, his voice low and earnest, a way to protect your reputation, but something has changed, at least for me. He reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and took her hand in his. The pretense has become less pretense with each passing day. For me as well, Zara admitted, her heart racing. Vaughn's free hand came up to gently touch her cheek. Then perhaps we should stop pretending altogether. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Zara closed the remaining distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened with shared longing. His arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer, while her hands found their way to his shoulders. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Vaughn rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he confessed. Why didn't you? She whispered. I didn't want you to think I expected anything in return for helping you. I wanted you to be sure. Zara smiled, her heart full. I am sure. About this, at least. The sound of the French doors opening caused them to step apart, though Vaughn kept hold of her hand. A couple emerged, saw them, and quickly retreated back inside with apologetic murmurs. We should probably return to the party, Zara suggested reluctantly. Yes, Vaughn agreed, though he made no immediate move to leave. But first, he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Would you permit me to court you properly, Zara Valenti? Not for show, but in earnest. The sincerity in his eyes made her heart swell. Yes, Vaughn Quincy, I would like that very much. As autumn draped the Colorado landscape in gold and crimson, Zara's life at Quincy Ranch settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly like home. Her practice flourished as word of her skills spread throughout the region. She had even begun receiving letters from women in neighboring settlements asking about specific remedies or requesting her services for upcoming births. Vaughn had been true to his word about courting her properly. 3 evenings a week, he still came to her cabin, but now their conversations lasted longer, punctuated by increasingly tender moments. Sometimes they rode together on Sunday afternoons, exploring the far reaches of his property, where he would point out landmarks and share stories about his early days on the ranch. As the days grew shorter and the nights cooler, they found more reasons to sit close together by her fireplace, reading or simply talking as the flames cast dancing shadows on the walls. Occasionally, Vaughn would bring his violin and play for her haunting folk melodies or classical pieces that revealed yet another layer of the complex man she was coming to love. One crisp October evening, they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in spectacular hues of orange and purple. Zara had wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and Vaughn had his arm around her, providing additional warmth. Winter comes early up here, he commented, his breath visible in the cooling air. Another few weeks and we might see the first snow. I'm looking forward to it, Zara replied. I've always loved winter, the quiet, the way everything slows down. It can be beautiful, he agreed. But isolated too. The roads to town often become impassable for weeks at a time. I don't mind, I have everything I need right here. She looked up at him, her expression softening. Though I suppose I should stock up on certain supplies before the weather turns. Vaughn was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. I've been thinking about the winter, he said finally, about you being out here in this cabin alone. I'll be fine, she assured him. The fireplace draws well, and Hannah has been teaching me to preserve food. I know you'll manage, he said, turning to face her fully. You're the most capable woman I've ever known, but that's not what concerns me. What then? He took her hand, his expression serious. Zara, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Every day I find more reasons to admire you, to want to be near you. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I had planned to wait until Christmas to do this properly, but I find I can't wait any longer. Zara's heart began to race as Vaughn slid from the bench to kneel before her, still holding her hand in his. Zara Valenti, I love you. I think I began falling in love with you that day in Willow Creek, when you stood alone against the crowd, refusing to be broken by their cruelty. I've grown to love your strength, your compassion, your intelligence, and your gentle heart. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? He opened the box to reveal a ring, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds in an intricate gold setting. It was my grandmother's, he explained. The blue reminded me of your eyes the first time you looked at me with something other than suspicion. Tears welled in Zara's eyes as emotion overwhelmed her. Vaughn, you don't have to answer right away, he said quickly. I know it's sudden and you might want time to— Yes, she interrupted, a radiant smile breaking through her tears. Yes, I will marry you, Vaughn Quincy. His face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to take her in his arms. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepened with the promise of their shared future. When they finally parted, Vaughn kept his arms around her. When? He asked simply. Before winter sets in, Zara replied without hesitation. I don't want to wait. Neither do I, he agreed. We could ride to Mineral Springs next week, speak with the minister. What about a proper ceremony? Your friends, the neighbors? Vaughn brushed a strand of hair from her face. Whatever you want. A quiet ceremony with just a few witnesses, or a larger celebration, it matters only that you become my wife. Something simple, Zara decided. Here at the ranch with those who have welcomed me and supported us. They spent the remainder of the evening making plans, their conversation flowing easily between practical considerations and tender expressions of love. When Vaughn finally rose to leave, the night had grown cold, and stars blanketed the sky in breathtaking profusion. Tomorrow, I'll tell Lloyd and Hannah, he said, reluctantly preparing to depart. Though I suspect Hannah already knows what I intended. She's remarkably perceptive, Zara agreed with a smile. She asked me last week if I had given any thought to what flowers might be available for a late autumn wedding. Vaughn laughed. Nothing escapes that woman's notice. He leaned down for one more kiss. Sleep well, my love. Tomorrow begins the rest of our lives. As she watched him walk away, the weight of the ring on her finger a tangible reminder of his love, Zara thought back to that terrible day in Willow Creek. How close she had come to losing everything, and how a stranger's courageous intervention had changed the course of her life. My treasure, he had called her then. Not knowing how prophetic those words would prove to be, news of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and surrounding area. Hannah was indeed unsurprised but delighted nonetheless, immediately taking charge of preparations for a ceremony to be held in 3 weeks' time. Lloyd organized the ranch hands to construct additional seating and tables for the celebration that would follow. Invitations were sent to neighbors and friends, including Judge and Mrs. Harrington, who responded with warm congratulations. Even Mrs. Blackwood sent a polite note expressing best wishes, though Caroline's signature was conspicuously absent. Throughout the whirlwind of preparations, Zara continued her healing work, finding that her engagement seemed to legitimize her practice further in the eyes of the community. More patients sought her services, and she began teaching Hannah and several other local women how to prepare basic remedies for common ailments. The Saturday before the wedding, Zara was organizing her herbs when a knock came at her door. She opened it to find a young ranch hand, barely 18, standing nervously on her porch. Miss Valenti, Mr. Quincy asks if you could come to the main house right away, he said, twisting his hat in his hands. Says it's important. Is something wrong, Tommy? She asked, concern immediately rising. Don't rightly know, madam. A fancy carriage arrived about an hour ago with some city folk. Mr. Quincy's been talking with them in the study ever since. Puzzled, Zara grabbed her shawl and followed Tommy to the main house. When she entered, Hannah was hovering near the closed study door, her expression troubled. Hannah, what's happening? Zara asked quietly. I'm not sure, dear. A man and woman arrived from Denver, very well dressed, very proper. Vaughn seemed shocked to see them, but he took them into the study right away. She lowered her voice. The woman called him Victor. Zara's breath caught. Victor, was that Vaughn's real name? Before she could process this revelation, the study door opened, and Vaughn emerged, his expression tense. Behind him stood an elegantly dressed couple in their 60s, the woman tall and aristocratic, with silver-streaked dark hair and familiar blue eyes, the man distinguished, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Zara, Vaughn said, his voice carefully controlled. I'd like you to meet my parents, Senator and Mrs. James Quincy of Massachusetts. Mother, father, this is my fiancée, Miss Zara Valenti. Zara's mind reeled as she automatically extended her hand. Senator, Massachusetts. The pieces of Vaughn's past were suddenly rearranging themselves. Miss Valenti, Mrs. Quincy said, taking Zara's hand briefly. How unexpected to meet you. Indeed, Senator Quincy added, his assessing gaze moving between Zara and his son. Victor has just been telling us about your upcoming nuptials. Victor. Zara couldn't help questioning, looking at Vaughn. A flush crept up his neck. My given name is Victor Vaughn Quincy, he explained. I've gone by Vaughn since coming west. One of many things our son has chosen to change, Mrs. Quincy remarked coolly. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only when Hannah tactfully suggested serving refreshments in the parlor. As they moved to the more comfortable setting, Zara tried to make sense of the situation. Vaughn or Victor had never mentioned that his father was a United States Senator, or that he came from such a prominent family. Once they were seated with tea and refreshments, Senator Quincy cleared his throat. We were quite surprised to receive your letter after all these years, son. Even more surprised by its contents. I thought you should hear about my marriage from me directly, Vaughn replied, though I didn't expect you to travel all this way in response. How could we not? Mrs. Quincy asked. After 7 years of silence to receive word that you're marrying she stopped, glancing at Zara. Well, we had to see for ourselves. A what mother? Vaughn's voice had an edge Zara had never heard before. An herbalist, a woman who helps others, a person of integrity and compassion. A stranger, Senator Quincy interjected firmly. Someone we know nothing about. Whose fault is that? Vaughn challenged. I've been here 7 years. You could have visited at any time. After the way you left, the scandal you created, Mrs. Quincy shook her head. It was impossible. Zara felt increasingly uncomfortable as the family tension escalated. Perhaps I should give you privacy to discuss. No, Vaughn said, reaching for her hand. You're going to be my wife. There are no secrets between us. Aren't there? Senator Quincy asked pointedly. Has she heard the full story of why you abandoned your career, your fiancé, your family? I know enough, Zara said, finding her voice. I know Vaughn left Boston because he discovered corruption in his law firm, tried to address it honorably, and was punished for his integrity. Mrs. Quincy gave a small, derisive laugh. Is that what he told you? How convenient to cast himself as the noble martyr. Mother, Vaughn warned. No, Victor, it's time for honesty, his mother insisted. Miss Valenti, my son accused Samuel Hargrove, one of Boston's most respected attorneys and his own mentor, of serious crimes. When asked for proof, he had none that would stand in court. The scandal nearly ruined our family's standing. His fiancé's father lost substantial investments. And rather than stay and fight properly through legal channels, Victor chose to disappear, leaving others to deal with the aftermath. Zara looked at Vaughn, whose jaw was clenched tight. "Is this true?" "Partially," he admitted. "I couldn't prove what Hargrove had done because he destroyed evidence. And yes, I left rather than continue a futile fight against a system that was protecting him." His eyes met hers, pleading for understanding. "But I never lied to you about why I left." "Just omitted certain details," Senator Quincy observed dryly. "Like your real name, your family's position, the fact that your abrupt departure had consequences for others." "What happened to Hargrove?" Zara asked quietly. A complex emotion crossed the senator's face. "As it happens, he was eventually exposed by another young lawyer who found additional evidence. Hargrove is currently serving time in prison." He looked at his son. "Something you would have known had you maintained any contact with your family." Vaughn appeared stunned. "When?" "2 years ago," his father replied. "Your mother tried to send word, but our letters were returned unopened." "I never received any letters," Vaughn said, confusion evident. "We sent them to V. Quincy, Willow Creek," Mrs. Quincy explained, "the last address we had for you." "I left Willow Creek after the first year," Vaughn said slowly. "The postmaster there knew I'd moved on but wouldn't have known where." An awkward silence fell as the family absorbed the misunderstandings that had compounded over the years. Zara's mind was racing, trying to reconcile the new information with what she knew of the man she loved. "Well," Senator Quincy said finally, "at least we know now why our letters went unanswered, and it seems you've built a life for yourself here." He glanced around the comfortable house. "A successful one, apparently." "Yes, I have," Vaughn agreed, his voice softening as he looked at Zara. "More successful than I ever imagined possible." Mrs. Quincy studied Zara with renewed interest. "Miss Valenti, forgive our abrupt arrival and perhaps hasty judgments. It's been difficult, not knowing what became of our only son." Zara saw the genuine pain beneath the woman's proud exterior. "I understand, Mrs. Quincy, family bonds are precious, even when strained." "Indeed they are," the older woman agreed quietly. "Which is why we came when we received Victor's letter, despite everything." Senator Quincy leaned forward, addressing his son directly. "Victor or Vaughn, if you prefer, we didn't come to disrupt your life or pass judgment on your choices. We came because, despite 7 years of separation, you are still our son, and we wanted to meet the woman you've chosen to marry." "And now that you have?" Vaughn asked cautiously. A hint of a smile touched the senator's lips. "I find I'm curious to know more about her. About both of you, and the life you've built here." It was a small opening, but Zara saw Vaughn recognize it for what it was: an olive branch extended across years of hurt and misunderstanding. "We're to be married next Saturday," he said. "If you'd care to stay until then, there's plenty of room here in the house." Mrs. Quincy's expression softened slightly. "We would like that, wouldn't we, James?" "Yes," the senator agreed, "very much." Hannah, who had been silently observing the exchange, chose that moment to suggest showing the Quincy's to their room so they could rest after their long journey. As they followed her upstairs, Zara and Vaughn remained in the parlor, both processing the unexpected turn of events. "I'm sorry," Vaughn said once they were alone. "I should have told you everything about my past." "Yes, you should have," Zara agreed, but her tone was gentle rather than accusatory. "Why didn't you?" He ran a hand through his hair. "At first, it didn't seem necessary. Then, as we grew closer, I feared you might see me differently as the privileged son of a powerful man who ran away from his problems rather than solving them." "Is that how you see yourself?" "Sometimes," he admitted, "though less often since meeting you." Zara took his hand, her expression serious. "Vaughn or Victor, if you prefer." "Vaughn," he said firmly. "I've been Vaughn Quincy for 7 years. It's who I am now." "All right, Vaughn," she continued. "I fell in love with the man you are, not the man you were in Boston." "Your past shaped you, but it doesn't define you," she smiled softly. "Though I must admit, I'm struggling to picture you as a senator's son in fine Boston society." A laugh escaped him, releasing some of the tension. Trust me, I was terrible at it. Always saying the wrong thing at parties, more interested in books than social climbing. He sobered. Does it change things for you, knowing about my family? Does it change things for you? She countered. Having them here for our wedding, he considered this. It's complicated. There's still much unresolved between us, but I'm glad they came, even if their arrival was something of a shock. Then we'll face it together, Zara said firmly. That's what partners do. Vaughn pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Have I told you today how much I love you? Yes, she murmured against his chest, but I wouldn't mind hearing it again. I love you, Zara Valenti, more than I ever thought possible, and I love you, Vaughn Quincy. She leaned back to look up at him. All of you, your past, your present, and most especially our future. The week leading up to the wedding was a delicate dance of reconciliation and preparation. Senator and Mrs. Quincy, James and Alina, as they asked Zara to call them, made efforts to learn about their son's life and the woman he had chosen. For his part, Vaughn gradually opened up about his years in Colorado, sharing stories of building the ranch from nearly nothing into the thriving operation it had become. Alina Quincy, once she overcame her initial reserve, proved to be a thoughtful observer with a keen mind. She spent time with Zara, learning about her herbal practice and even accompanying her on a gathering expedition to collect late-blooming medicinal plants. You're not what I expected, Alina admitted as they carefully harvested yarrow flowers on a sunny afternoon. What did you expect? Zara asked, genuinely curious. I'm not entirely sure, Alina replied, adding another stem to her basket. When we received Vaughn's letter saying he was marrying an herbalist he'd met in a frontier town, well, I had certain preconceptions about women who practice medicine in the West. About anyone who would choose such an unconventional life, Alina clarified. But watching you work, seeing the knowledge and care you bring to your practice, it reminds me of my father. He was a doctor in Vermont before he entered politics. Zara looked up in surprise. I didn't know that. Few do, Alina said with a small smile. It wasn't considered relevant to my role as a senator's wife, but I spent many hours in his surgery as a girl, much as I suspect you did with your father. Yes, Zara agreed. He believed women often made better healers because of our capacity for empathy. A progressive view, Alina observed. As is my son's, apparently. His father and I worried that his idealism would be crushed by the realities of the world. Her expression softened. It seems instead that he found a place where that idealism could flourish. He's built something remarkable here, Zara said. Not just the ranch, but a community that respects hard work and integrity above social standing. Alina studied her thoughtfully. You truly love him, don't you? With all my heart, Zara replied without hesitation. Good, because despite our differences, my son deserves to be loved for who he is, not what name or fortune he carries. Alina's eyes glistened briefly. His father and I made mistakes, focusing too much on the family reputation and not enough on understanding Vaughn's need to follow his own conscience. Meanwhile, Vaughn and his father found their own path toward reconciliation through more practical channels. The senator, who had managed the family's considerable investments for decades, offered advice on expanding the ranch's operations. Together, they rode the property, with James asking thoughtful questions about water rights, grazing rotations, and breeding programs. You've built an impressive operation, James acknowledged as they sat their horses on a ridge overlooking the valley. I wouldn't have thought the boy who could barely sit through a board meeting had such a head for business. I had good teachers, Vaughn replied. Lloyd Peterson knows more about cattle than any professor at Harvard, and he was patient enough to share that knowledge. James nodded thoughtfully. You always did learn better by doing than by theorizing. He hesitated. Vaughn, I owe you an apology. Vaughn looked at his father in surprise. The senator rarely admitted error. When you came to me about Hargrove, I should have listened more carefully, James continued. I was too concerned about political implications, about your mother's social standing, about appearances. I forgot that the values I claim to stand for in public should apply in private as well. Thank you for saying that, Vaughn said quietly. It means more than you know. When Hargrove was finally exposed, I was ashamed of how we'd treated you, James admitted. We tried to find you to make amends, but you disappeared completely, changed your name apparently. Not entirely, Vaughn pointed out. I just started using my middle name, James chuckled. Your mother's family name, she'll be pleased about that, though she'd never admit it. He grew serious again. Your Miss Valenti is quite remarkable, not at all what we expected, but I can see why you love her. She saved me, Vaughn said simply. Not just that day in Willow Creek, but every day since. She helped me remember who I wanted to be. The day of the wedding dawned clear and crisp, with just enough autumn warmth to make the outdoor ceremony comfortable. The ranch had been transformed, the area between the main house and barn swept clean, decorated with fall flowers, golden aspen boughs and ribbons. Simple wooden benches had been arranged in rows, and an arch of twisted branches marked the spot where the couple would exchange their vows. Zara prepared in her cabin, assisted by Hannah and, somewhat surprisingly, Vaughn Quincy, who had brought a family heirloom, a delicate lace veil that had been worn by Quincy brides for 3 generations. I'd be honored if you would wear it, Vaughn said, carefully unfolding the gossamer fabric. It should complement your dress beautifully. Zara's wedding dress was simple but elegant ivory silk with subtle embroidery at the neckline and cuffs, ordered from Denver months earlier for a special occasion that she hadn't specified to the dressmaker. It's lovely, Zara breathed, touching the veil gently. Are you certain? Absolutely, Vaughn assured her. Family traditions should continue, especially the beautiful ones. As Hannah arranged Zara's dark hair in an elegant updo adorned with small white flowers, Vaughn shared stories of her own wedding day, displaying a warmth and humor that Zara hadn't glimpsed during the family's tense initial reunion. There, Hannah declared at last, securing the veil in place. You look absolutely radiant, my dear. Zara stood before the small mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her, poised, beautiful, and filled with quiet joy. How far she had come from that terrifying day in Willow Creek, when she had stood alone against a mob, her future in tatters. A knock at the door announced Judge Harrington, who had agreed to escort Zara to the ceremony in place of her father. Miss Valenti, he said when Hannah opened the door, it appears it's time. His eyes widened appreciatively when he saw her. My dear, you are a vision. Thank you, Judge, Zara replied, gathering her small bouquet of late roses and greenery that Hannah had assembled. I'm ready. The walk from her cabin to the ceremony site seemed both endless and too brief. Guests stood as she approached ranch hands and their families, neighboring ranchers, patients she had treated, and friends from both Mineral Springs and the surrounding homesteads. Even a few faces from Willow Creek were present, including Mr. Henderson, the shopkeeper who had falsely accused her, now a regular patient for his rheumatism. And then she saw Vaughn, standing tall and handsome beneath the arch, his eyes fixed on her with such love that her heart seemed to expand in her chest. Beside him stood Lloyd as his best man, and next to Lloyd, looking surprisingly proud, was Senator James Quincy. When Zara reached the arch, Judge Harrington placed her hand in Vaughn's and the minister began the ceremony. The words were traditional, but the emotion behind them was anything but ordinary. When they exchanged their vows, Vaughn's voice remained steady, though his eyes shone with feeling. I, Vaughn Quincy, take you, Zara Valenti, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love, honor, and cherish you in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for as long as we both shall live. He slipped a simple gold band onto her finger to rest beside her engagement ring. When it was Zara's turn, she spoke clearly, her voice carrying across the assembled guests. I, Zara Valenti, take you, Vaughn Quincy, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love, honor, and cherish you in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for as long as we both shall live. She placed a matching band on his finger, her hands steady despite the emotion filling her heart. "By the authority vested in me," the minister proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." He smiled at Vaughn. "You may kiss your bride." As Vaughn took Zara in his arms and sealed their union with a tender kiss, the gathered crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Even a leaner Quincy was seen to dab at her eyes with a delicate handkerchief. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. Tables laden with food prepared by Hannah, and the other ranch wives groaned under the weight of roasted meats, fresh bread, autumn vegetables, and pies of every description. Music from fiddles and guitars filled the air as lanterns were lit against the gathering dusk. Vaughn and Zara moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes. When they reached Judge and Mrs. Harrington, Margaret embraced Zara warmly. "I knew from that first evening at the Blackwoods that you two were meant for each other," she declared. "William owes me a new hat. He said it would take until Christmas for Vaughn to propose." The judge shrugged good-naturedly. "I underestimated the young man's courage, it seems. Or overestimated his patience," Vaughn countered with a grin, his arm secure around Zara's waist. As the evening progressed, Vaughn led Zara to the center of the cleared area that served as a dance floor. The musicians began a waltz and other couples joined them, moving in time to the music under the stars. "Happy, Mrs. Quincy?" Vaughn murmured as they danced. "Completely, Mr. Quincy," Zara replied, smiling up at him, "though I'm still getting used to the name." "You wear it well," he assured her, spinning her gently. "As well as you wear that veil. I was surprised to see it. Your mother offered it this morning. A family tradition," she said. Vaughn's expression softened. "That means more than you know. It's her way of truly welcoming you into the family." As the music ended, Senator Quincy approached them, requesting the next dance with his new daughter-in-law. Vaughn relinquished her with a bow, moving to where his mother stood watching the festivities. "You've chosen well, son," Eleanor said as he joined her. "She has strength and grace in equal measure." "Yes, she does," Vaughn agreed, watching as his father guided Zara around the dance floor, both of them smiling at something the senator had said. "Your father and I will be returning to Boston next week," Eleanor continued, "but we hope you'll consider visiting us sometime, both of you." Vaughn looked at his mother in surprise. "You want us to come to Boston? Is that so shocking? We've missed 7 years of your life, Vaughn. I'd prefer not to miss any more." She met his gaze directly. "Your home is here now with Zara and this ranch you've built. We respect that. But perhaps there's room for us in your life as well, even at a distance." Vaughn felt a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying begin to lift. "I'd like that," he said simply. "And I think Zara would too." Later that night, after the last guests had departed and the Quincy's had retired to the main house, Vaughn led Zara back to her cabin, now their cabin, at least until the renovations to the main house's east wing were completed. "Wait," he said as they reached the porch steps. Before she could question him, he swept her into his arms and carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing as he nearly stumbled on the doorframe. Inside, the cabin had been transformed. Fresh flowers filled vases on every surface, the bed was made up with new linens, and a bottle of champagne sat chilling in a bucket of ice. "Hannah," Zara guessed, touched by the thoughtfulness. "Hannah, my mother, and I believe several of the ranch wives," Vaughn confirmed, setting her gently on her feet. "It seems you've won quite a few hearts around here." "Only one that matters," she replied, reaching up to loosen his tie. Vaughn captured her hands, bringing them to his lips. "I still can't quite believe you're my wife," he murmured. "That day in Willow Creek when I called you my treasure, I had no idea how true those words would become." "I thought you were mad," Zara admitted with a smile, "or possibly misguided in your chivalry." "Perhaps a bit of both," he acknowledged. "But I knew even then that there was something special about you, something I wanted to protect, to cherish. And now I know that what I want to protect isn't just you, but what we've found together." He cupped her face gently. Love like this is rare, Zara, a treasure beyond price. One we'll guard together, she promised, rising on tiptoe to meet his kiss. Outside, the first star of evening appeared in the darkening sky, bearing silent witness to the beginning of their life together, a life built on courage, compassion, and the unexpected gift of true love. 5 years later, on a bright spring morning, Zara sat on the wide porch of the main house, watching as Vaughn taught their 3-year-old daughter, Eleanor, to sit on her first pony. The little girl's delighted laughter carried across the ranch yard, where new life was evident everywhere, calves frolicking near their mothers, fresh paint on the barn, and the foundation being laid for a proper clinic beside the original cabin, which Zara had outgrown as her practice flourished. In her arms, Zara cradled their newest addition, 2-month-old James, named for his grandfather, who along with Willow Quincy had become regular visitors to the ranch. The reconciliation between Vaughn and his parents had deepened over the years, bringing healing to old wounds and creating new bonds of respect and affection. Lloyd and Hannah Peterson approached the porch, Hannah immediately cooing over the sleeping infant while Lloyd commented on little Eleanor's natural seat in the saddle. Just like her father, the foreman observed proudly. Got away with horses, that one. And her mother's determination, Hannah added with a smile. Did you hear what she told Mrs. Blackwood at church on Sunday? Zara groaned. I was hoping no one else noticed that. What happened? Lloyd asked. Caroline was making one of her usual comments about how surprising it was that Vaughn had settled for ranch life when he could have had such prospects in the East, Hannah explained. And little Eleanor looked right at her and said, My papa says some people don't know treasure when they see it. Lloyd's booming laugh startled baby James, who blinked sleepily before settling back against his mother's shoulder. The Blackwood woman turned 3 shades of red, Hannah continued gleefully, and Judge Harrington nearly choked trying not to laugh. Zara shook her head, though she couldn't suppress a smile. I should probably have a talk with her about repeating everything she hears. I wouldn't worry too much, Lloyd advised. Sounds like she's got a good grasp of the truth already. As the Petersons continued to the cookhouse to oversee preparations for the midday meal, Vaughn lifted Eleanor from the pony and set her on his shoulders, carrying her toward the porch while the ranch hand led the gentle animal back to the corral. Mama, did you see me? Eleanor called, her dark curls so like Zara's bouncing as Vaughn climbed the steps. I did, sweetheart. You're a natural horsewoman, Zara replied, shifting James slightly to free one arm for her daughter as Vaughn set her down. Eleanor peered at her baby brother. Is he still sleeping? He sleeps all the time. That's what babies do, Vaughn explained, settling beside Zara on the bench. You did too once upon a time. Did not, Eleanor declared with the certainty only a 3-year-old could muster. I always rode horses. Vaughn and Zara exchanged amused glances over their daughter's head. Why don't you go help Aunt Hannah with the biscuits? Vaughn suggested. I think she's making your favorite kind. With the promise of cinnamon biscuits, Eleanor was easily persuaded to give her parents a moment of relative peace. As she skipped toward the cookhouse, Vaughn slipped his arm around Zara's shoulders. She handled that pony well, he observed. Good balance, no fear. Like her father, Zara agreed, leaning into his embrace. Though I hope she inherits your patience along with your riding ability, she's got my stubbornness already. A formidable combination, Vaughn acknowledged with a chuckle. He gently stroked James's downy head. And this little man. What do you think he'll inherit from us? Your intellect, I hope, my practicality, and perhaps both our tendencies to champion lost causes. Speaking of which, how's Mrs. Turner's arthritis? Improving, Zara replied. The new treatment is working better than I expected, doctor. Mitchell from Denver has asked me to document the results for a medical journal he's contributing to. Vaughn's face filled with pride. Your reputation is spreading, Mrs. Quincy. Soon we'll have physicians from all over the country seeking your expertise. Hardly, Zara demurred, though she couldn't hide her pleasure at the recognition her work was receiving. but it is gratifying to see traditional remedies being taken seriously by the medical establishment. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the activity of the ranch unfold before them, hands moving purposefully between tasks, cattle grazing in the distance, the steady rhythm of a frontier life built on hard work and mutual respect. "Do you ever miss it?" Zara asked suddenly. "Boston, your legal career, the life you might have had." Vaughn considered the question seriously, as he did all questions from his wife. "Sometimes I miss certain aspects, the intellectual challenge of the law, the libraries, the concerts. But no, I don't miss the life I might have had." He turned to meet her gaze. "Because I wouldn't have had this, you, our children, this land, this community we've built. Even with all the challenges, the hard winters, the drought 2 years ago, the time Alina got lost and we were frantic for hours." "Especially with the challenges," he replied. "They've shown me what truly matters." He brushed a kiss against her temple. "When I called you my treasure that day in Willow Creek, I had no idea what riches awaited us." Zara smiled, remembering that moment that had changed everything, a proud, frightened woman facing a hostile crowd, and the tall stranger who stepped forward to claim her as his own. "I thought you were just being gallant," she said softly. "I was," he admitted. "But some part of me recognized what you would come to mean to me even then." He gently turned her face toward his. "You are my treasure, Zara Quincy, you and our children and the life we share. And you are mine," she whispered, leaning forward to meet his kiss. From the cookhouse, Alina's voice called out, demanding their attention for some new discovery or achievement. Baby James stirred, announcing his hunger with increasingly insistent sounds. The peaceful moment was broken, replaced by the beautiful chaos of family life. As they rose together to meet the immediate needs of their children, Zara felt a profound gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought her to Willow Creek, for the courage Vaughn had shown in defending her, and for the love that had grown between them, unexpected, powerful, and enduring. What had begun as a desperate act of kindness had blossomed into a life richer than either of them could have imagined, a true treasure, beyond price and beyond measure.